The only thing better than when your favorite podcaster has a fresh episode for you in your podcast feed is when your favorite podcaster says yes to you being a guest on their show, and now you are the fresh episode in your own podcast feed. I mean, there are probably better things, but it is a very exciting moment. And I have to say that podcast guesting is a exciting and one of my favorite ways to connect with others. In this episode, we're going to get into all things podcast guesting, how to start guesting, how to be a great guest, and lessons I've learned over the past decade and then some from being on the other side of the mic. Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. Hello, and welcome back to the Content with Character podcast. All right, speaking of podcast guesting, which is what we're talking about today, in last week's episode about collaborations, I said that I was going to share a collaboration that was all about collaboration with you, and I don't know, my brain just was not firing on all cylinders. I had a tummy ache, the wind was blowing the wrong way, so I just forgot. But I have remembered this week, and it's in the show notes. The podcast, the collaboration on collaborations, was an episode that I recently recorded with Tanya Fox of Fox Talks Business, where we get into all the ins and outs of collaboration. Tanya is a collaboration coach, so it's a very robust resource and very applicable to a lot of what we talk about here. So once you're done listening to the episode where I'm a guest with her, I invite you to keep on going and queue up more of her episodes to enjoy. In fact, I know that Tanya was having some technological issues, so I didn't see the episode when I put the link in the show notes, but I think that it's going to be airing soon. So you can just use that link and follow the show and you'll be all set to go. Anyway, I guess that it kind of ends up working out that I shared the episode this week instead of last week when I meant to because A, like I said, she was having technological issues, and B, this week is, as aforementioned, on the topic of podcast guesting. So it fits. Now, personally, I've been making podcast guesting one of my top business focuses this year as far as connecting with other people. So I have a lot to say about it. I'll get into why I chose to place this as a priority, how it's going, where I find guesting opportunities, how to get a little bit better at it. And I'll slow down because there is a lot. But before we head straight into today's content, I did want to quickly introduce myself and share this with you.
Again, I really loved your Content with Character this week about asking for help. It was excellent. And I just want you to keep getting a wider audience because everybody needed to hear that one. I'll stop here. Bye.
Okay, so I wanted to share that because hearing that recent voice message did act as a reminder for me to check my podcast back end and see if I could spot any newcomers here on the show. Because I know a lot of you, like that listener, have been sharing the episodes. So lo and behold, I checked in there and I spotted a couple. And I just want to say thank you. If you have been sharing these episodes with someone in your life or tagging me in your Instagram stories or forwarding along my emails, thank you so much. I can't get beyond how much I appreciate you for that. And if you haven't done those things, I don't know, maybe today is the day. Maybe it's the day you'll start. Well, either way, whether you're a new or regular loyal listener, let's make sure that we are on the same page, and I'm going to kind of fill you in on who I am and what is going on around here. I'm Emily Aborn. I'm your occasionally hilarious host. My greatest superpower, I would say, is being able to do an entire week's grocery shop in 15 minutes flat. Now, the key is to do it at night. That does not count transit time to and from the grocery store. But since I don't really particularly enjoy grocery shopping for myself, never mind other people, that superpower is not one that I have built a business around. I decided to save that one for my personal life, and the way I work is around my other coveted skill, which is writing and connecting people through through messaging and marketing. I'm a copywriter, a podcast host, and I'm also a speaker who I love sharing on things that are like out of the box on marketing and what marketing really is in small groups and organizations. So what I really strive to do on this podcast is one part self-reflective, okay? Like sometimes it's just airy-fairy, yay, happy, fun. And one part we're going to actually be like actionable, practical, tangible, the real deal, like stuff you can use and implement right away. I do believe that my personal philosophy, I'll say, is that marketing is about a whole lot more than just like making a bunch of posts on social media. And I really want to kind of bring some awareness around that and talk about those out of the box things. So intro over. If you ever want to learn more about me or connect with me, you can visit emilyaborn.com. I love hearing from you. And let's embark onward to the topic du jour, which is podcast guesting. So I think I'd like to start by sharing like why podcasting, what the value is in it, and why specifically I chose to place it as a high priority for my own kind of like focus and efforts this year. So regarding just the general like value in podcasting and who makes a good fit for it, all the ways it can help you in your business. By the way, I will miss things in this episode because there's so much. There's always going to be something that I miss. This is just kind of like a tip of the iceberg kind of thing, which that should excite you, not frighten you, because there are just so many more possibilities. They are endless. And I really, really do believe that. So here's like kind of 9 value adds to being a podcast guest, and also a little bit of a way that you would know that it's for you. So I think that like it will add value for you if you want to expand your reach and connect with new audiences and new collaborators. It is for you if you want to establish your authority and credibility in your field, or where, when you've been a guest. I think that sharing those episodes that you've guested on, it's one of the many ways that you can share to your clients and your community that you're knowledgeable and trustworthy. Number 3, podcast guesting is for you if you are the kind of person who wants to impact other people with thought leadership, ideas, you love inspiring, you love changing lives through the power of your words. Maybe you want to teach and educate people in like specific areas or help them avoid problems and understand more. So podcast guesting can also be a great tool for that. It's also a really fantastic way to grow relationships and have a lot of fun networking. Like it's like productive networking. I kind of love that about it. It isn't just about the listeners. It's primarily about the listeners, but it's also a great way to connect with hosts and collaborate and pave the way for future opportunities. So if it has a lot of bigger picture kind of impact. I also think that podcast guesting can help you to refine your message, increase your confidence, improve your communication skills, and help you with like that kind of like storytelling, speaking your audience's specific language, that kind of thing. It's also a fantastic way if you're looking like, if you're just like, I don't have content, this is a great way to generate content without like really having to generate content. I mean, you are, but you're just kind of like showing up and working your magic and boom, content is created. Like I love using a podcast interview as a way to repurpose into content of my own. So meaning questions that they ask me, I can often turn those into post ideas. Always giving credit, of course. Topics that you cover on episodes or topics of interest are great ways to generate more content. So that's another huge value add or like benefit of being a podcast guest. I think it's also a wonderfully cost-effective way to increase your marketing efforts. So yes, it takes time and energy, but it tends to be no cost. There are some exceptions to that rule, of course, but it tends to be a no-cost way to really build your brand awareness. And in doing that, it's also like a high impact. Like you tend to be in front of like a number of people or listeners. And then lastly, I just think it is absolutely, I mean, you can't even put like a value or like a price tag on this, but I think it's a fantastic way to make amazing new friends, collaborators, like meet people, hear and share stories, engage with people all over the world, spark new ideas and creativities. Like it really is an endless world of possibility for what can come out of this when you start connecting in this way. So that's kind of like this is why I decided to focus on it. Here's some of the value in it. And also like if those are things that you're looking for, then it might be something that you consider and it might make a good fit for you. Or maybe it's something you're already doing. And this is just like confirmation. Yes, I'm on the right track. Yes, I should be focusing on this. I couldn't really think of as many things or as many people as who it's not for, which I think is good. But I think it's not for you if I did like ask a couple of communities that I'm in. I think that it's not for you if you're just looking to sell to the audience and like promote yourself. And I'll say this. Overly promotional guests, they really detract from my podcast. And I don't think it ends up being a good look for the host or for the guest when an episode just turns into kind of like a giant infomercial. So if you're like, oh, shoot, I was just kind of looking for an opportunity to sell myself. Like if you can't resist inserting a call to action into every sentence or putting your content behind some sort of wall where it's like, well, I have these 5 top secrets to converting people with your website copy, but I'm not going to share them with you in this episode, right? So if you're just kind of like out to offer elusive or vague ideas without actually delivering value, guesting probably isn't going to be a good opportunity for you. It may also not be time right now to be focusing on podcast guesting if you don't have clear topics, a clear message, or clear like next steps or offerings ironed out. It can be a little bit confusing if you're confused, and that can lead to kind of like a disjointed outcome or disjointed conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this isn't always the case because some guests don't mind that, and it's sort of more just like a storytelling or like a personal experience kind of thing. But generally speaking, especially if you're looking forward to grow your business, that is probably true. So some business owners also may just not have a business that's applicable to podcast listeners. I was kind of trying to think of like specifics on what these might be. And personally, I see a place for like almost every industry because there's a podcast niche for so many different kinds of people. But I would imagine that there is some industry that I cannot think of that people are just not listening to podcasts about. So if you have one of those industries, podcast guesting it's kind of like a no-brainer, but it's not really a good choice. The other thing is like if you're extremely rigid in what you share, meaning that you're unwilling to adapt your message or stray from a prepared framework or set of questions, or you have like no time to do the work up front to research who you're connecting with and what their audience is in need of. I think that if you are just kind of like there to like show up and repeat the same thing over and over and over again, it's not the best place to do that. And then lastly, I guess if audio medium just really is not your thing, like even if you're sharp as a tack, even if you're great on video or you're great in person or you're great in writing, you have all the information. If audio really is not your thing and it makes you super duper uncomfortable, I don't know, maybe you're just really not a great conversationalist. You might want not to start with podcast guesting. You might want to work on those skills and that confidence there first. Okay. And I want to quote something that my friend Sarah Heater responded to something I posted on Threads recently about podcast guesting. She said, I think podcast guesting could benefit literally anyone, but that doesn't mean everyone's good at it or that everyone wants to do it or that everyone would enjoy doing it. I think people who don't want to or tried it and hate it shouldn't do it. Everyone else just needs a little strategy. And I thought that was a great that was like summing up all of my points above. So I thought that was really helpful. Thanks, Sarah, for weighing in. And she said it perfectly, but for the most part, it is for everyone. And you can at least get started somewhere right away with it and build up skills and confidence. It takes practice, like anything in life, like every single thing we ever want to get better at takes practice. And I think that's true for like pretty much anything that's worth pursuing. So a lot of people I talk to, they want to get started with it and they want to find more opportunities for guesting. So I'd like to shift gears into where you actually find these opportunities to be a podcast guest, because that is a question that is burning on all of our minds. Some of these you probably know and some are probably new to you. And again, this is not a full list. This is just kind of where I find podcast guesting opportunities, where I used to, where else you might start looking. So I will say that any specific links that I reference are going to be in the show notes, and that relates to the entire episode. Okay, first one, and like hot on my mind lately, is Podmatch. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love Podmatch because it basically shows you podcasts and podcasters that you would be a good fit with based on the words that you put in your profile, based on the things that you're looking for and your speaking topics. You then can choose yay or nay. You can send a direct message right to them, and I'll talk more about like kind of how that goes, but I really love Podmatch. It's also a great tool if you are a podcast host and you're looking for great guests. Now, there are other services like this. Most of them are like a paid kind of service where they do like the matching suggestions for you. So there are other services out there, but I am loving Podmatch. I also love that you can kind of share your Podmatch profile anywhere else if you wanted to. So it could hypothetically kind of be that one sheet for you or that media kit for you anywhere that you want to be pitching or sharing what you speak about. So I like that about it. There's other things I like about it. There's a community element in it, and I love that, but you can filter. There's a lot of things I like about it, but I just want to thank my friend Alicia Galati. She's the first one that told me about it, and I really, really have been enjoying it. And I kind of like to try things like experimentally at first and then, be like, yes, this is 100%. So I kind of am through my experimental phase and I'm still loving it. The second resource that I used to use very often is a podcast collaborative Facebook group. And I'll definitely include the link to the specific one I'm talking about because there are lots out there. But this one is a really great group, and there are other Facebook groups like this. Like I said, this one specifically also has a paid version where you get to like network with other podcast guests and hosts and things like that. So it's a really great place, I think, to get started. The other one I love, and this is like kind of something that we maybe overlook, is just local connections and local podcasts. So for example, in our actual area, there are two within driving range to me: Bizcast New Hampshire, which I've been a guest on, and Monad Talks, which these, and I've also been on one in Burlington, Vermont recently, the Wool Radio FM with Eric Calio. Now, these are great because they feature local business owners. Local business owners are listening, and they're typically ones that you can like actually go to and have a conversation with the host in person, which is truly a delight when it gets to happen. So just keeping your eyes and ears open, depending on where you live, there are sometimes local connections that have podcasts, and they might be like right in your very backyard. The other thing that I have found helpful as when looking for podcast guesting opportunities is just like really sending a direct pitch to somebody I already listen to and love. So there are some podcasters I've been listening to for years, and I just send them a message and be like, hey, I've been listening to you for years. I'm a loyal listener. I also have a podcast XYZ, and I've noticed that you haven't talked about this yet. I would love to have this conversation with you. I already know we're going to have good rapport because we're like BFFs because I listen to you every week, right? So just really reaching out to somebody that you already listen to, that already has a show. They have guests. That's a hugely important factor. But just sending them like a message. So the other one is like friends and connections. You definitely want to be letting people know that you're looking for podcast guesting opportunities. You never know who knows who. Connecting fellow podcasters often like to connect their other podcasters to great guests. So really letting other podcasters know that that's what you're looking for. And then letting people know on your website somehow. So, or in your social media or in your newsletter. So maybe you have a whole page that's kind of like dedicated to that, or it's something that you remind people of in your social media, or you share about it in your newsletter. So those are just all sorts of examples of where you can actually find podcast guesting opportunities, and hopefully some you haven't even thought of yet. And like I said, there are way more than that. That's not an extensive list. That's just kind of like, here's ideas to get you started. Okay, from here, we're going to shift gears into how it's going now. And just real quick to shift gears, we're going to rewind a little. So the first podcast I ever guested on was for a chiropractor locally. She was also my boss. I got to play co-host with her, aka I was like the peanut gallery, back in 2008. Then we kind of did a little bit more in 2014. We talked a little more specifically to my area of expertise, which is when I owned a mattress store, and I would go on podcasts and local radio shows giving sleep tips and the importance of a good night's sleep and toxins in your bedroom and things like that. And then fast forwarding again to 2018, that was when I really knew, okay, I want a podcast of my own. So I took this like how to podcast class twice actually, because must learn all the things, right? I took this class twice, and then I started my first podcast. She built this in 2019 at that same recording studio where I first ever guested, which is consequently where I found myself last year on another podcast. So that's fun. But I share all this to share that prior to this year, I just was kind of letting any and all opportunities come to me. I was in the podcast collaborative Facebook group, but I didn't really show up with my own pitch. I would just kind of like comment on other people's, and I would look for guests to be on my show. I often spent most of my time just letting people like introduce me to other people if they thought I'd be a good fit, but I didn't ask for it. I just kind of let it happen. And it was in taking that sort of slower approach, I learned, wow, I really, really love this. And I want to keep on giving value in this way to more people. I want to be doing this more. So that's when I really decided 2024 is my year to get a little bit more proactive in this and start actually raising my hand as a guest, start introducing myself as a guest, being a little bit more bold in pitching myself as a guest. So I set out the year at the beginning of the year with a goal of scheduling 26 interviews. Well, I hit 20, and then I decided to make my goal just a little bit bigger. So that's when my dear friend Alicia Galati, she stepped in. She said, check out the platform Podmatch. And wow, I have to say, I could not believe how many podcasters I was getting the opportunity to connect with. So now I've upped my goal to 50 by the end of 2024, and I'm at 33. So let's keep cheering Emily on. Go, Emily, go. Okay, the reason for sharing all this is simply to share that I've been podcast guesting a long time, and I've taken a more passive and also active role. So I wanted to bring all that experience to you and sharing like what I learned in doing this. And then that way you can see, okay, how does this relate to me if I'm looking to gain more of these opportunities too? So I have a couple of tips for you. I'm going to try to be quick and concise, but here's kind of where, let's start with like pitching tips for gaining more of these guesting opportunities. So my first pitching tip, and like any podcaster would tell you this, is you have to listen to the show. You have to learn a little bit about the host. If you don't at least have time to check out 5 or 10 minutes of a show, see if it's a good fit, see if they're even speaking to the audience that's relevant for you. If you don't have time to do that, you should wait until you do. And if they don't have guests on their show, that is very important information. Don't bother pitching them. Don't pitch yourself. I can't even tell you how many times people have pitched me to be on this show, Content with Character, and I'm like, okay, if you look at my feed for 5 seconds, you will likely not see any guest names. And that should clue you in that perhaps that is a curious thing, and perhaps she does not have guests. And then you would find out after listening to an episode, it is confirmed. She is a solo show. Tip number 2 for pitching. Your pitch, well, there are going to be like all these do's and don'ts that you're going to read out there. And my personal opinion is that it does not need to be so formulaic. It needs to be human and show how you're going to show up and give value. So for my first podcast, She Built This, I got so many pitches. Honestly, I still do, even though I don't do the show anymore. It's annoying. They were constant. They came via email usually or in Instagram DMs. And at the very best of them, they gave me some like half in compliment, like congrats on 200 episodes. At their worst, they started out with things like, dear sir, right? So as a podcast host, we are able to, because we're getting pitched often, we are able to spot inauthentic and robotic and tell when people have not done a lick of research faster and faster and faster. So let me ask you this. If you want to stand out, is that how it's going to happen? No. What would it hurt to just pitch like maybe you would talk to that person? So like what I'm seeing is that everybody wants this perfect pitch. Everybody wants the one that says, oh my gosh, choose me. And I think that the perfect pitch is one that just says, hey, I like your show. I'd love to come talk to you on this topic. I don't think anyone else has shared in this way yet. Yay or nay? Are you in or out? Now, obviously not exactly like that, but really, I don't think that there are special sauces and secret formulas for pitching. I think that the more human you can be, the more real you can be, the more relating to the guest and showing that you've actually listened to some of their episodes or maybe just know what they're talking about. I think that's one of the huge ways to stand out, which leads me to looking at those episodes and seeing if you're able to find a unique way to share about your area of expertise that not everyone else is doing or saying. So what I mean by that is like, don't be vague or specific or use a whole bunch of industry jargon that every single other person doing what you're doing is using. Find areas in podcast content within your industry that maybe other guests are overlooking or avoiding, or conversations no one else is really having, or things that you disagree with, or things that you see people struggle with all the time. And unfortunately, no one is addressing it, right? So when you look for those kind of gaps, that's where you get to step in and say like, hey, here's my kind of unique spin on things. I actually do have a very different take from everybody else. And this is why I might make a really good conversation for you. And whenever you can, use the language of the ideal kind of listener whenever possible, and just stay out of that like complex language, that jargon, that industry speak whenever you can. And so I think that's it for now. Just like a couple little things on pitching. I think my other thing is just like if somebody says yes, but then it ends up to not feel like a good fit for you. Or let me say this, if they also pitch you to be a guest on their show and you're like, it doesn't actually really seem aligned, but thank you, flattering. It's totally okay to turn it down and thank them for the invitation and the opportunity. Bless and release. Now, I say this because in a desire to get on more podcasts and be a guest on podcasts, I've made the mistake in being on shows that maybe I should have turned down and actually said no to. So that's just kind of like a extra little like pitching thing. Like just because you send a pitch does not mean it has to go all the way and you have to go through with it if it ends up being like not a good fit somewhere in the process. Okay. General guesting, just like things I've learned, tips I have for you. This is the most important. This is the most important one. This is not just another appointment in our calendar, okay? This is not an opportunity I personally take lightly. Somebody is giving me a huge gift. They're giving me a conversation, a connection, a collaboration, and they're giving me access to their listeners and putting like my name on an episode. So I do not take that lightly. I take that with a lot of weight and a lot of responsibility, which means I want to show up prepared. I want to show up clear on my topic. I'm in a quiet place. I have headphones. I have a quiet quality mic. I do what they ask me to do. I show up on time. I give them all the parts and pieces that they need. Like I want to show up in a way that stands out from other podcast guests so that I get to be the guest that keeps getting asked back again and again and again. Secondly, on guesting, this is just like a general kind of thing. But I don't recommend using this as like a giant sales pitch opportunity. If you have a freebie or something or a book or a podcast, that's great. Those are lovely, gentle invitations. If you have some other starting point resource you have, that's lovely. But I don't recommend you show up and sell. And I really recommend you kind of like leave that language out of the interview overall and save it for when they specifically ask you for some sort of like call to action or way to follow up with you. Number 3, my tip here as a guest is just like general guesting tip. Thank them. Thank them on the air towards the end of the episode or at the beginning of the episode. Thank them in some way when you're actually in the conversation with them. I personally love a thank you card, and I like to send those when I'm on guest when I'm a podcast guest in any opportunity I can. Also, just sending a thank you email. And here's the biggest way to thank them: share the episode. This is like my most major one of all time. Share the episode. Share in multiple ways if you can. Like maybe there's a page on your website. You can put all of their episodes or all of the episodes you've been a podcast guest on. Maybe you can share it on social media, in a newsletter, on your own podcast. You'll hear me do that from time to time. Maybe you can create a playlist of all of the places you've been a podcast guest on and share that in some way. So those are just some ideas of ways you can thank them. Like sharing is a huge way to say thank you to somebody for giving you the gift of having you on their platform. Why do I stress sharing so much? Let's go back to last week and talk about how this is a collaboration, and a collaboration is best when it is give. They are giving you access to their platform. They are giving you their hard work and effort that they put in to build this podcast. Their consistency and commitment, really, that's like the gift to you, okay? It's like, I've been consistent and I have committed listeners and loyal listeners, and this is now my gift to you. So your goal or focus should be to just give back. And I really think that focusing on that will help you stand out as a guest and get you asked to come back as a repeat offender, okay? A repeat guester. Okay. And then I'm just going to wrap up with something I think is a little fun, and I've kind of like honed in on this year. So I think organization is key when it comes to preparation to be a great podcast guest. And I also think that organization actually helps you to be a better podcast guest because you show up on time, because you show up knowing exactly what you're going to be talking about. So I came up with like my own little organizational system, and some of you are like eyes glazing over. You know who you are, who does not like talking about organization. But I think it's really, really helpful. So as you know, I have that great grocery store superpower, being able to do all of my grocery shopping in 15 minutes. And that is because I'm quite organized. So for when it comes to podcast guesting, I have a little spreadsheet that I like to use, and I'm happy to share it. Spreadsheets are not entirely interesting to me. I don't love spreadsheets, but it does really help me to track the places that I've pitched. It helps me know what they say in response. It helps me know when I pitched so that if I need to follow up, I can, which topic I reached out to them with when the episode airs, all the links, all the ways I've shared it and helped promote it. And it also helps me to reach out to people that, like I said, like I haven't heard back yet, or they were a maybe, or they were a not yet. The last thing it helps me to do is to follow up after I recorded an episode with somebody in case, and this happens a lot, in case they forget to send the episode information when it goes live, but then it's like gone live on social media and you didn't know about it, and suddenly they're tagging you and sharing. So that's a thing. It happens. And I think that keeping organized is a great way to get ahead of that. Like sometimes I'll see it in my feed, or I'll see when an episode goes live before they've even started sharing about it. And then I'm like, okay, I know that I want to be sharing about this on Tuesday, for example. So keeping organized is a great way to be a better guest, because then you have this power of follow through and preparation like already built in for yourself. And I really, really love it for that reason. Okay. And if you are like a spreadsheet person, you want to see that spreadsheet, I'm totally happy to share that with you. You can just find me anywhere in the show notes that you like to connect with people and send me a message, and I'll email it to you. On that note, I want to share a couple of ways that I can help you be a podcast guest, like some of the things that I actually could do to support you if this is at all a focus for you. And then we'll just take it home with like one final tip on being that memorable guest. So here are just like a few ideas. Like if you want help with this, I can help you create a action plan. I do strategy sessions with people, and this is like one of my favorite things to talk about with you is how do we actually map all this out, take action, where do I pitch to, da da la la la, Emily, give me the access to that beautiful spreadsheet. But by the way, the spreadsheet is yours. You don't have to like get my help with it, but this is if you want to put 2 and 2 together. The other one is like if you need help with writing your speaker page or your one sheet or your bio, or you want like somebody to look over your pitch and ask and see like, am I being me? Am I being human? Is this a good pitch? I'm happy to do those things. And then also we can talk through like who makes a good fit for you. Do you need help refining your topics? How do you share your topics, right? Like, do you just have like a topic and then a couple bullet points? Like, what does all that look like? So it's really something I can help you create a whole action plan around and get really, really clear on it if you are looking for that extra support. So I'll put a link in the show notes for my strategy call. It's a perfect place we could get started together. And if that's help you want, you know where to find me, and you can reach out and we'll chat. Oh, and if you're like, I just need to hear the website name, Emily, I don't want to go to the show notes, it's just emilyaborn.com. Okay. Lastly, I know that this is a little bit controversial, but this is actually something that I do, and I would recommend it, I think, to help improve myself as a guest. Here is what I do. Are you ready for this? It's slightly controversial. I go back and I listen to some of my interviews. Now, I know some of you are just cringing hearing me say that. Some of you don't like the sound of your own voice, or you have no desire to hear yourself having that conversation, and like any blunders you make, you're just like, no, that's not for me. For me personally, I don't hate the sound of my own voice. It's not that I love the sound of my own voice, but I've grown up with my voice being recorded. So I've come to know it and be like, this is my voice. And I find it really important to actually hear some of those blunders, because it actually helps me to refine how I say things. I'm not just listening for blunders. I'm also able to listen to interviews where something is going really, really well and say like, ooh, I love how I said that there. I want to keep on saying it like that. And I love to be able to go back and like repurpose things in interviews as it applies. So it just helps me because I'm able to get a full picture of like, where do I need some improvement, and also some reflection on what I'm doing really, really well. So to listen back or not to listen back, that is the question only you can answer. A lot of people actually say, no, don't do it, and they don't like it. And it's totally okay if you're in that camp. But for me, I will say that has been a huge way to improve my guesting and hosting realistically too. But it's also just helped me like express and communicate my message clearly and make sure that I'm giving value in those interviews. So that's what I love about it. Bonus, if you want a bonus on it, it also helps to like refresh your memory as to what you talked about so that you can make more meaningful shares when your episodes are live. Okay, so that was a lot, I know. Like I said, I'm happy to talk any of this out with you if you want to kind of dig further into any of these little tips. I hope you go forth and podcast guest more if that is something of interest to you. And next week, we're going to be getting into podcasting as a host from the hosting side, and also like a few little fun things on that. So whether you're considering starting a podcast of your own, or you're 200 some odd episodes deep already and you want to keep going for another 200, next week's episode is going to be for you. And I will chat with you then. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com, and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at Emily Aborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.